December 15th, 1967. Rush hour. The Silver Bridge, connecting PointPleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio, was doing what it had done every evening for nearly 40 years, carrying commuters home. And in the weeks that followed, a strange detail began circulating through the grieving town. People claimed the Mothman had been seen over that very bridge in the days before it fell. This is part 2 of the Mothman story, the collapse, the investigation, and the explanations serious researchers have put forward in the decades since.
TNT plant, the grave diggers near Clendenin, the 4 witnesses who reported being chased by a winged red-eyed creature, and the wave of sightings that followed throughout the following year. Now we turn to the event that would forever link this small town's name to tragedy and to the explanations, both ordinary and extraordinary, that have been offered ever since.
The Silver Bridge had connected PointPleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio since 1928. By 1967, it was carrying a volume and weight of traffic its designers had never anticipated. The Model T Ford that dominated American roads when the bridge was built weighed around 1,500 pounds. The average car on the road in 1967 weighed closer to 4,000. On the evening of December 15th, with the bridge packed for rush hour, it failed catastrophically. 46 people died, and only 21 survived. 2 victims were never recovered. It remains, to this day, one of the deadliest bridge disasters in American history. The official investigation, conducted by federal engineers in the aftermath, found a clear physical cause. The collapse was attributed to faulty infrastructure, specifically a manufacturing defect in a single eye bar in the suspension chain, a microscopic crack invisible to inspection methods of the era that finally gave way under decades of stress and modern traffic loads. This finding is well documented in National Transportation Safety Board and engineering archives and is not seriously disputed by credentialed structural engineers. There is no physical, mechanical, or engineering link between the Mothman sightings and the bridge's failure. We want to state that plainly, because what happened next in the public imagination is where fact and folklore begin to blur. In the aftermath of the disaster, some residents reported having seen the Mothman near the bridge in the days before it fell. Tamarac's account of local history notes that many claimed to see the creature flying over the bridge that very day, though it's worth being precise about what many means here. This is an oral tradition that grew in the months and years after the tragedy, not a contemporaneous police report filed before the collapse. This is where theory diverges sharply from fact. Some writers have speculated that the Mothman appeared to warn of the bridge's imminent collapse, that it was somehow drawn there in anticipation of the disaster, or, in the darkest version of the theory, that it caused the tragedy itself. None of these ideas have any supporting evidence. They are folklore, born from a human impulse that shows up across nearly every culture in history. When tragedy strikes without warning, we look for an omen we might have missed. A creature seen beforehand becomes retroactively a harbinger. It is a powerful story. It is not a documented fact. What is documented is this. After the Silver Bridge collapse, the Mothman sightings stopped almost entirely. As suddenly as the creature had appeared 13 months earlier, it disappeared from local reports.
So what does the evidence actually support? Let's go through it carefully. The leading scientific explanation offered by wildlife officials at the time was misidentification of a real, known animal. One of the prevailing hypotheses was that witnesses had encountered a sandhill crane, a large bird whose size and the reddish coloring around its eyes could plausibly be mistaken for something far stranger, especially at night and at a distance. Researcher Daniel A. Reed examined this question in more depth. He studied the historical migration patterns of sandhill cranes through the PointPleasant region and proposed that in cases where witnesses didn't specifically describe glowing eyeshine, a great blue heron was the statistically more likely culprit, herons being more common in the area and sharing a similar tall, broad-winged silhouette. There's a second candidate, and this one has physical evidence behind it. In 1966, a hunter named Ace Henry shot a snowy owl near PointPleasant, a bird with a wingspan of nearly 5 feet, large enough that local newspapers described it at the time as a giant owl. That mounted specimen is still on display today at the Mothman Museum. A snowy owl is a genuinely unusual sight that far south. They're native to the Arctic and rarely venture into West Virginia. An animal that far outside its normal range, encountered unexpectedly at night by people already on edge, fits the eyewitness descriptions reasonably well. Pale or greyish colouring, a large wingspan, and, critically, eyes that genuinely do reflect red or orange in artificial light, a trait shared by several owl species due to the structure of their retinas. Neither explanation accounts for every single detail in every report. Speed, behaviour, the sheer size some witnesses described. That's the honest limitation of any mundane explanation theory. It has to stretch to cover the most dramatic accounts. But it's also worth remembering that eyewitness memory under fear and low light is notoriously unreliable, a finding well established in cognitive psychology research independent of this case entirely.
No discussion of this case is complete without addressing John Keel directly, because so much of what the public knows about the Mothman doesn't come from the original 1966 newspaper reports. It comes from Keel's 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. Keel was a real journalist who genuinely relocated to West Virginia and spent over a year interviewing witnesses, and that fieldwork has real historical value. But his book also weaves in UFO sightings, telepathic communications, government conspiracies, and a sprawling theory connecting all of it to ancient cosmic forces, material that goes well beyond what any witness statement to police actually described. In a 2002 piece for Skeptical Inquirer, journalist John C. Sherwood, who had once worked alongside UFO researcher Gray Barker, compared Keel's private letters from the time of his investigation against what Keel later published and reported finding significant differences between the two, raising real questions about the book's accuracy.
This doesn't mean Keel invented the Mothman. The original witnesses, the original newspaper headline, the original police report, those exist independently of Keel and are well documented. What it means is that the version of the legend most people are familiar with today, the Men in Black, Indrid Cold, the prophecy angle, is largely a literary construction built on top of a smaller, stranger, and better documented core of eyewitness testimony.
So, let's separate one final time what's confirmed from what's theory. Confirmed on November 15th, 1966, 4 named witnesses reported a large winged red-eyed creature to the police, and it was covered the next day in a local newspaper. Confirmed, dozens of additional sightings followed over the next 13 months, drawing national attention. Confirmed, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed due to a documented structural defect, killing 46 people. Confirmed, sightings of the creature dropped off sharply after that date. Theory that the creature was supernatural, predictive, or malevolent. Theory that it was connected to UFO activity, telepathic entities, or government conspiracies. Plausible, evidence-supported alternative that witnesses encountered a large, unfamiliar bird, a sandhill crane, a great blue heron, or an out-of-range snowy owl, under conditions of darkness, fear, and a town already primed by rumor to expect something strange. What nobody can definitively prove is which of those explanations is correct. The eyewitnesses, by every account available, believed they saw something real and frightening. More than 50 years later, none of them ever published a retraction. That single fact is, in its own way, the most compelling piece of this entire mystery. Not proof of a monster, but proof that whatever those 4 young people experienced on a dark road outside Point Pleasant, it was real enough to them that they never walked it back. Today, Point Pleasant has made peace with its strangest chapter. The town holds an annual Mothman festival every September, complete with vendors, live music, and guided tours of the original sighting locations, and it's home to the world's only Mothman Museum. A creature that once emptied the streets after dark now brings tourists in by the thousands.
The Mothman remains one of America's most enduring unsolved mysteries, not because there's no plausible explanation, but because no explanation fully satisfies everyone who's looked closely at the evidence. If you found this story as fascinating as we did researching it, let us know in the comments. Do you think the witnesses encountered something genuinely unexplained, or a very large, very startling bird? Hit subscribe and ring the notification bell. The Mystery Archive uncovers a new historical mystery every week, and you won't want to miss what we're digging into next. And if you ever find yourself driving a back road in West Virginia after dark, maybe just keep your eyes on the road. Thanks for watching.